David had lived in his quiet neighborhood for many years. It was a peaceful place, with small houses, green trees, and friendly neighbors. Every morning, he would walk his dog along the sidewalks, wave hello to people, and enjoy the calm around. David loved his home because it was his safe place, a place where he could relax after busy days at work. But David's life was not ordinary. He held a very important job. He was the director of the FBI. However, very few people knew this fact, not even most of his neighbors. David liked to keep his work private and his life simple. One bright afternoon, David was in his backyard, trimming some plants. He enjoyed gardening, and it helped him forget about the stress of his job. Suddenly, he heard a car stopping near his driveway. Looking up, he saw two police officers stepping out. They did not look friendly or calm. David wondered why the police were there. The officers walked straight up to him and said, "Sir, we got a call that someone is trespassing on this property. Are you the person who was seen here?" David was surprised. "This is my home," he said politely. "I live here. You must have the wrong place." The officers looked at him with doubt. One of them asked for his ID. David showed them his driver's license. But it was clear the officers did not believe him fully. They kept looking around as if expecting to find someone else. David remained calm and explained again, "I have lived here for over 5 years. This is my house and my land." But the officers did not listen carefully. They seemed tense and suspicious. One officer said, "We have a report that a man matching your description was seen on this property without permission. You need to come with us to clarify this." David was shocked. "I am not going anywhere. I am on my own property." The officers spoke loudly now, raising their voices. Neighbors started coming out of their houses to see what was happening. Some watched quietly, others whispered to each other. David noticed a few faces filled with doubt or discomfort. No one stepped forward to support him. David tried again. "Please, I am telling you the truth. This is my home." The officers did not respond. Instead, they called for backup and started asking more questions. David felt a mix of anger and sadness. He could not understand why they were treating him like a criminal when he was only in his own yard. The officers' words and actions showed that they saw him as a threat, not as a neighbor or a homeowner. At that moment, David thought about his job at the FBI. He was one of the highest-ranking officials in law enforcement in the whole country. Yet here he was, being treated like a suspect simply because of how he looked and where he lived. This was a painful reminder of the unfair treatment many black men face every day, despite his frustration. David stayed calm. He knew losing his temper would not help. Instead, he spoke clearly and respectfully. He said, "I want to cooperate. But please understand that I am the owner here. If you check the property records, you will see that this land belongs to me." The officers did not want to listen or check. They kept insisting he was on someone else's property. One officer said, "We have to make sure you are not breaking any laws." David realized that the problem was not about the law. It was about their judgment and the assumptions they made about him. They assumed he did not belong in this neighborhood. They assumed he was suspicious without any proof. The neighbors were watching the scene unfold. Some felt uncomfortable because they knew David was a good man. Others were unsure and remained silent. David hoped someone would speak up to support him, but no one did. After a while, the officers called a supervisor. The supervisor arrived and asked David some questions. David explained everything again. The supervisor looked at David's ID. "And at the house?" said, "Sir, if this is your home, then we have no reason to keep you here." David was relieved, but the feeling of being wrongly accused stayed with him. The officers apologized quietly and left the property. David went back inside his house, closing the door behind him. Sitting down, David thought deeply. He was grateful nothing worse had happened, but he could not ignore the fact that his race and skin color made him a target. He had to remind himself that many others did not have his protection or his calm mind. Many black men were stopped, questioned, or worse, simply because of who they were. David promised himself that he would use his position to help change these unfair rules and attitudes. He knew this was just the beginning of a long fight to make. Sure, everyone was treated with respect and dignity. That day, David learned once again how important it was to stand strong, stay calm, and fight for justice, not just for himself, but for others who faced the same challenges. After the police officers left, David felt a heavy weight in his chest. Even though they had gone, the experience stayed with him. He sat quietly in his living room, thinking about what had just happened outside his home. It was hard to believe that the police had come to question him about trespassing on his own property. It was even harder to understand why they did not believe him at first. David knew that many people faced this kind of treatment, but living it himself was still painful. David's phone started to ring. It was his close friend and colleague Lisa, who worked with him at the FBI. She had heard about the police visit and wanted to check on him. David answered the call, trying to keep his voice steady. "Lisa, thank you for calling, as it happened today. The police came to my house because someone called and said I was trespassing." Lisa was shocked. "David, I can't believe that happened to you. You're the director of the FBI. Yet they treated you like a criminal." David sighed. "Yes, Lisa, that's the truth. It's a reminder of how some people judge others just by their skin color. No matter who I am or what I do, I am still seen as a threat." Lisa listened carefully and said, "This is not just about you. This is a problem many black men and women face every day. Police are supposed to protect everyone, but sometimes they act on bias without realizing it." David agreed. "Exactly. That is why I want to handle this carefully. I don't want to make the situation worse, but I want to make sure the officers involved understand the mistake and learn from it." Over the next few days, David worked quietly behind the scenes. He contacted the police department to share his experience and requested that they review the officers' actions during the visit. He wanted to make sure the department knew about the problem of racial bias and took steps to improve. David also thought about the neighbors. He wondered how they had seen the situation. Did they believe the officers? Did they think he was suspicious? He knew that many people lived with fear or misunderstanding because of their skin color. He hoped his neighbors would understand that their assumptions could hurt someone innocent. One evening, David decided to take a walk in the neighborhood. He wanted to meet some neighbors and start conversations to build trust and understanding. As he walked, some neighbors greeted him with smiles, while others looked away or seemed unsure. David did not feel angry. Instead, he felt determined to connect with people and change their views. He stopped at a small park where some neighbors were chatting. David joined the group and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm David. I live nearby. Wanted to come by and say hello." A woman named Karen smiled warmly. "Hi, David. I'm glad you came. We heard about what happened with the police. It was shocking." David nodded. "Thank you, Karen. I want to use this moment to talk about how we can all help make our communities safer and kinder for everyone." The neighbors listened as David spoke about respect, fairness, and understanding. He shared how he hoped people would not judge others by their appearance, but get to know them first. The conversation was honest and respectful. Ask questions. Others shared their own worries. It was the start of something positive. Meanwhile, at the police department, supervisors took David's complaints seriously. They arranged for the officers involved to attend special training on racial bias and community relations. The goal was to help officers recognize when their thoughts or actions might be unfair and to treat everyone with respect. David felt hopeful that this would make a difference. He knew change was not easy, but it had to start somewhere, at work. David kept the incident private from most of his colleagues. He didn't want to make a big scene, but instead wanted to lead by example. He continued to focus on improving law enforcement practices and supporting fairness in every part of the FBI's work. One day, a young FBI agent named Marcus came to David's office. Marcus was also black and had recently joined the agency. He said quietly, "Sir, I heard about what happened to you at home. I want you to know that it means a lot to me. Sometimes I worry about how I will be treated even here." David smiled kindly. "Marcus, your feelings are valid, no matter where. We must stay strong and support each other. Together, we can work to change things from inside and outside." Marcus nodded, feeling encouraged. Outside the FBI, David's story slowly began to spread. Some neighbors talked about it, and a few local news outlets heard about the police visit. David was careful not to make the situation personal or angry. Instead, he focused on the bigger picture, how important it was to fight unfair treatment and build trust between police and the communities they serve. People started to see David not just as the FBI director, but as a man who had faced the same struggles many others faced. His calm and respectful response inspired others to speak out against bias and misunderstanding. Some people in the neighborhood reached out to David, wanting to learn more about him and share their own stories. He welcomed these conversations. With an open heart, the walls of fear and suspicion began to come down. David also continued to support training programs for police, officers, and community leaders. He spoke at events, sharing his experience and ideas for change. His voice was clear and steady, reminding everyone that justice must be fair and that respect for all people was the foundation of a safe society. Through these efforts, David found hope. He knew the road ahead was long and difficult, but he believed that by working together, communities and law enforcement could build stronger, kinder relationships. At the same time, David never forgot the day when police had questioned him on his own property. It was a lesson in humility and strength. It reminded him why his work was so important to protect not only the law but the rights and dignity of every person. David's experience became a symbol of resilience. It showed that even those with great power and responsibility were not immune to prejudice. But it also showed that with courage, calmness, and kindness, it was possible to face unfairness and work for a better future. After the incident with the police, David's story slowly began to reach more people. At first, it was mostly close friends and colleagues who knew what happened. They were shocked that someone so respected and important could be treated with suspicion right in his own neighborhood. But as the news spread, it caught the attention of a few community leaders and activists who wanted to learn more and support David's message. David spent many evenings answering phone calls and meeting with people who wanted to talk. Some wanted to hear about his experience with the police. Others wanted to discuss the larger problem of racial bias in law enforcement. David listened carefully to each person and shared what he could from his own life and work. One afternoon, David was invited to speak at a local community center. The room was filled with people from different backgrounds, young and old men, and women, people of all races. They all came because they wanted to understand and to find ways to make their neighborhood safer and fairer. David stood in front of the group and spoke with calm confidence, told them about the day the police came to his house and how it felt to be treated as a suspect in his own home. He did not speak with anger or blame. Instead, he spoke about the importance of respect, fairness, and trust. He said, "What happened to me is a reflection of a bigger issue. Too many people, especially black men and women, face unfair treatment every day. This is not right. We need to change how we think about each other and how law enforcement works with the community." The audience listened quietly, some nodding in agreement. After his talk, many people came forward to share their own stories, times when they or someone they loved had been stopped, questioned, or judged unfairly. There were tears, but also hope. They saw that they were not alone, and that change was possible. David felt encouraged by the honest conversations. He knew that talking openly about these issues was the first step toward healing and progress. It was not easy to face these truths, but it was necessary. At the same time, David's position as FBI director gave him a unique opportunity. He began working with other leaders in law enforcement to create better training programs. These programs focused on understanding cultural differences, recognizing unconscious bias, and building stronger relationships between police and the communities they serve. David also pushed for clearer policies to protect people's rights and prevent situations like the one he faced. He wanted to make sure officers had the tools and knowledge to do their jobs fairly and respectfully. The process was slow. Change always is. But David remained patient and determined. He knew that one incident would not fix everything, but it could start a conversation and open doors. In the meantime, David continued his work at the FBI. His daily schedule was full of meetings, briefings, and decisions. Sometimes the weight of his responsibilities was heavy, but he found strength in knowing that his work could help create a safer, more just world. His team respected him not only for his skills, but also for his kindness and fairness. They saw how he treated everyone with dignity, no matter their background or position. David believed that leadership was about service, and he led by example. Outside of work, David maintained his quiet life, still enjoyed gardening, walking his dog, and spending time with family. These simple moments kept him grounded and reminded him why he worked so hard. One day, a reporter from a local newspaper asked to interview David about the police incident. David agreed, but was careful about what he said. He wanted to share his story to raise awareness, but did not want the focus to be on him personally. Instead, he wanted people to understand the problem of bias and how it could hurt everyone. In the interview, David spoke calmly and clearly. He said, "This is not about me. It is about how we treat each other as human beings. Everyone deserves respect and fairness, no matter their race or where they live." The article was published, and it reached many readers. Some people were surprised and ashamed to learn how easily someone like David could be misjudged. Others felt inspired to think differently and to support efforts for change. However, not everyone responded positively. Some people were defensive or said that the police were just doing their jobs. David understood that change could be uncomfortable and that not everyone was ready to accept these ideas. Still, he believed that with patience and persistence, attitudes could shift. He continued to speak at community events, meet with leaders, and support education programs about fairness and justice. Through it all, David stayed humble. He knew that the journey toward equality was long and sometimes difficult, but he also knew that every step forward mattered. One evening, after a long day of meetings and speaking engagements, David sat quietly at home. He thought about how far he had come from being wrongly accused on his own property to becoming a voice for justice in his community. He smiled to himself, feeling proud but not proud in a boastful way. He was proud because he had faced a difficult moment with courage and used it to help others. David also thought about the many people who still faced unfair treatment daily. He made a promise to keep working, to keep speaking, and to keep fighting for a world where no one would be judged by their skin, color, but by their character and actions. As the night grew darker, David felt hopeful. He believed in the power of understanding and kindness. He believed in the strength of community and the possibility of change, and he knew that he was not alone. Many people shared his vision for a better future. Together, they would keep moving forward step by step, day by day, toward justice and respect for all. After David's story started to become known in the community, many people began to talk about what had happened. Some neighbors who had been quiet before now came forward to share their thoughts. Some were surprised and sorry that they hadn't spoken up when the police first arrived at David's home. Others wanted to learn more about how to help stop unfair treatment. David welcomed these conversations. He knew that change could only happen if people understood the problem and wanted to do better. He met with local leaders, church groups, and neighborhood organizations to discuss ways to build trust between police officers and the community. One day, a meeting was held at the community center. Police officers, neighborhood members, and local officials all came together to talk honestly. David spoke first, thanking everyone for being there. He reminded them that respect and understanding were key to making the neighborhood safe and welcoming for all. Some officers admitted they sometimes acted too quickly or based their decisions on assumptions. They said they wanted to learn how to do better. Community members shared their fears and hopes. They talked about times when they felt scared or treated unfairly by law enforcement, and how that made it hard to trust the police. David listened carefully and then said, "We need to build a partnership where both sides work together. Police officers should know the people they serve, and the community should feel safe to talk to officers without fear." The meeting ended with a promise. Everyone agreed to work on programs that would bring police and neighbors closer. These programs would include community events, open discussions, and training for officers about diversity and fairness. David also decided to speak publicly about his experience. He wanted to reach a larger audience and encourage others to speak up about unfair treatment. He gave interviews to local newspapers and radio stations, always focusing on hope and change rather than anger or blame. His message was clear. We can't ignore the problems. We have to face them together with open hearts and minds. When we treat each other with kindness and fairness, we all benefit. Some people criticized David, saying he was too positive or that he didn't understand the full struggles of those less fortunate, but many others thanked him for speaking out and giving them courage to share their own stories. David's courage inspired community leaders to push for more training and better policies within the police department. The city council approved funds for workshops on racial bias and communication skills for officers. These efforts helped officers learn to recognize their own biases and work harder to serve everyone fairly. At the same time, David continued his work at the FBI. He used his position to support national efforts to improve police training, to promote justice for all Americans. His experience gave him a personal understanding of why these changes were needed. David also encouraged young people in his community. He visited schools to talk about respect, fairness, and the importance of standing up for what is right. He told stories of hope and strength, showing that one person can make a difference. Through his work, David met many inspiring people, activists, teachers, officers, and neighbors who were committed to building a better future. Together, they formed a network of support and change. Despite all the progress, David never forgot how it felt to be wrongly accused and treated unfairly. That experience reminded him why his work was important and why he must keep fighting for justice. One afternoon, David received a letter from a young boy in his neighborhood. The boy wrote that he had been scared of the police because of stories he had heard. But after hearing about David's experience, he felt hopeful. The boy said he wanted to grow up and help make his community safer and fairer. David was deeply moved by the letter. It showed him that his message was reaching the next generation. It gave him hope that the future could be better than the past. As months passed, David saw more signs of change. Police officers in his neighborhood were more friendly and open. Community events brought people together. Conversations about race and fairness became more common and honest. David knew there was still work to do, but he was proud of the steps taken. He believed that small changes added together could create a big difference. One evening, as David sat with his family, he thought about how far he had come. From being questioned in his own yard to becoming a voice for change. His journey was a reminder that even hard moments could lead to good things. He smiled, feeling grateful for the chance to make a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who dreamed of a fairer, kinder world. David understood that justice was not only about laws, but about respect, understanding, and love for one another. And with that belief, he looked forward to a future filled with hope and progress. After months of working with the community and law enforcement, David began to see real change around him. The police department had introduced new training programs focusing on fairness, respect, and understanding. Officers were learning how to see people as individuals, not just by the color of their skin or their appearance. The neighborhood felt safer, and trust between police and residents was slowly growing. David still remembered the day the police had come to his house. That moment stayed with him not as a painful memory, but as a lesson. It reminded him how important it was to keep fighting for justice and fairness, no matter how difficult the road. One afternoon, David was invited to speak at a citywide event about community, safety, and justice. The room was full of people from all walks of life: police officers, city officials, activists, and neighbors. David stood at the podium and spoke with calm strength. He said, "Justice is not just about laws. It is about how we treat each other every day. It is about respect, kindness, and fairness. When we build trust and understanding, we create safer communities for all." His words were met with applause. Many people felt inspired to continue working to work change. David's message was clear and hopeful, reminding everyone that even small steps could lead to big progress. Back in his neighborhood, David continued to be a leader and a friend. He organized events where police officers and community members could meet and talk openly. They shared meals, stories, and ideas. These gatherings helped break down barriers and build friendships. David also helped start a youth program that taught young people about respect, leadership, and justice. He believed that the future depended on educating the next generation to be fair and kind. The program became popular, and many young people joined. They learned about the importance of standing up for what is right and supporting one another. David saw their confidence grow, and he felt proud to be part of their journey. At the same time, David continued his work at the FBI. He used his experience to help guide national policies that promoted fairness in law enforcement across the country. His leadership was respected, and his voice made a difference. Despite his busy schedule, David never forgot the simple joys of life. He still enjoyed gardening, walking his dog, and spending time with family and friends. These moments kept him grounded and reminded him why his work was so important. One evening, David received a call from a local school principal. She wanted to thank him for inspiring her students. She told him that after hearing David's story, many children felt more hopeful and confident about their futures. David smiled, feeling grateful. It was moments like these that made all the challenges worth it. As time passed, the neighborhood continued to grow stronger. The police and community worked together to solve problems, prevent crime, and support one another. Trust was no longer a distant dream, but a growing reality. David knew there was still much work to do. He understood that change took time and patience. But he believed that with courage, respect, and kindness, progress was possible. Looking back, David saw how his experience the day he was wrongly accused on his own property had become a powerful story. It was a story of hope, strength, and the power of standing up for what is right. David's journey reminded everyone that no matter who you are or where you come from, you deserve to be treated with dignity. It showed that even in difficult times, we can choose to be calm, kind, and strong. And most of all, it proved that together, people can build a better world when where justice and fairness are not just words, but actions. David continued his work with renewed energy and hope. He believed in a future where every person, no matter their skin color or background, could live without fear and with respect. His story became a beacon of light for many, inspiring change and reminding us all that fairness and kindness are the foundation of a just society.